Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Forza Motorsport 6 Apex on the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti for FPS monitoring. This time I won't be using cam since this is a universal Windows application, so I'll be using MSI Afterburner instead. So Forza Motorsport 6 Apex, I'll be doing 1080p, 1440p and 4K. To skip 10 of those sections of the video, check the description below. So first I'll be doing 1080p with the maximum settings, including 2 times MSAA, and so far the game is over 60 frames per second most of the time. There are some drops below 60 every now and then to 55 frames per second, which aren't that noticeable when you're not looking at the FPS counter. I'll be testing a Brazil stage and then just a rainy stage in the Top Gear track, so I'll be using the highest number of racers possible, which is I think 14 or 15, I don't remember correctly. So I'll be just showing you sun and then rain to show you the best case scenario and close to the worst case scenario, since on the Top Gear track there is also grass, and I was quite surprised to see that the game runs totally fine at 60 frames per second. You'll notice some GPU bottleneck, since the GPU usage will drop below 90%, but as you'll see in the video, it's still enough to get 60 frames per second, so in my opinion that's quite impressive. Then I'll switch to 1440p, and in order to get 60 frames per second there, I lower particle effects from high to medium. That was crucial to get 60 frames per second. Without particle effects on medium, I was getting like 45 frames per second when there were a lot of particles in the rainy stage. I also lowered particle resolution from full to half. And finally at 4K, I just lowered everything to the minimum, except in textures and anisotropic filtering. And the game was between 45 and 70 frames per second, with very uneven frame times. I felt a lot of the micro stutter with those uneven frame times, especially on the Brazil stage, so I recommend avoiding 4K and sticking to 1080p or 1440p. I only show you 60 frames per second since that's what this game is designed for. Even on the base Xbox One, this game runs at 60 frames per second. If you have a G4560, I recommend just capping the game at 60 frames per second, so we get a more consistent game. There's an option for that in the options menu. You'll also notice that I'm using 16 GB of RAM. You might ask yourself why. With 8 GB of RAM the game is playable and all that kind of stuff, but some random times the game stutters awfully with 8 GB of RAM. I had to close as much stuff as I could from the background in order to get it to run fine on 8 GB of RAM, and I still got some micro stutter and some freezes, so this game uses a lot of RAM. I'm not sure how it can use even more RAM than on Forza Horizon 3. I find it kinda weird, but this compared to the beta runs much better. They improved the game a lot compared when we first tested it on PC, and I'm still shocked that we can get it to run at 1440p 60 frames per second on very close to the highest setting. And if you have an i5, i7, a Ryzen 5, something like that, the game will run better on this card, especially on 1080p, since on the parts that we got low GPU usage, for example in the Brazil stage, over 70 frames per second pretty much all the time without much of an issue, since the Pentium was limiting the GPU in some parts. But again, as I told you, it's still enough for 60 frames per second, so I didn't see a reason to test another CPU in this case. But anyway guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video, thanks for watching and see you next time.